In 1932, a Detroit auto worker fed his family of 7 on 12 cents a day, and a single potato was the secret weapon that made it possible. Number 9 on this list was so genius that government economists studied it in 1934 just to understand how poor families were surviving at all. And number 1, it fed more Americans through the Great Depression than every soup kitchen in the country combined, yet most people under 50 have never even tasted it. Hit that subscribe button, because what your great-grandmother did with one potato is going to change the way you look at the spud sitting in your pantry right now. Let us count down the 25 genius Depression-era poor man's meals that stretched a single potato into dinner. Number 25, potato peel broth. Before you laugh, understand this. In 1933, a potato cost about 2 cents, and the peels were considered the most valuable part of it by women who had been hungry long enough to know better. Your great-grandmother would scrub the potatoes hard with a stiff brush, peel them thick, and drop those peels straight into a pot of water with an onion skin, a bay leaf if she had one, and whatever scrap of bone was lurking in the icebox. She simmered it for an hour. The broth came out golden, mineral-rich, and surprisingly meaty in flavor because potato skins are loaded with potassium, iron, and starch that thickens water into something that actually tasted like soup. Strained over a slice of stale bread, this was supper on Thursday nights when payday was still 2 days away. Modern nutritionists now confirm that most of a potato's nutrients live in the skin. The women who made this knew it without ever reading a single study. Number 24, fried potato sandwich. This is the meal that fed steel workers in Pittsburgh and coal miners in Pennsylvania on shifts where the lunch pail held nothing else. A single potato, sliced thin as a coin, fried in a cast-iron skillet with bacon grease until each slice turned crisp at the edges and translucent in the middle. Then, those golden discs got piled 3 high between 2 slices of white bread, salted heavily, and pressed down hard until the bread soaked up every bit of the rendered fat. That was lunch. That was sometimes dinner. The whole thing cost about 4 cents to make in 1934, and it carried a grown man through 10 hours of physical labor. The bread softened against the hot potatoes, the fat made everything taste like meat, and the salt told your body it had eaten something real. Children ate them after school. Fathers ate them at midnight when they came home from second shift. Nobody talked about it being poor food. It was just food. Number 23, Hoover stew with potato. Named bitterly after the president who watched the country starve, Hoover stew was the meal that kept families alive in shantytowns across the country between 1930 and 1934. The recipe shifted with what was available, but the bones of it were always the same. 1 potato, diced small, a handful of dried beans soaked overnight, a can of stewed tomatoes if you could afford it, and whatever vegetable scraps had not yet rotted. It all went into a single pot of water and simmered until the potato broke down and thickened the broth into something close to gravy. Some women added a few slices of hot dog when their husband finally got paid. A pack of Franks ran about 12 cents and could stretch through 3 pots. The whole stew cost maybe 15 cents and fed 5 people for 2 nights. It was not romantic. It was not Sunday food. But it was hot. It was filling. And it carried a generation through the worst economic catastrophe this country has ever seen. Number 22, boiled potato with milk gravy. This is the meal that Southern grandmothers made when there was nothing in the smokehouse, nothing in the garden, and nothing in the budget. 1 large potato peeled and boiled until soft, then split open on a plate with a fork. Over the top went a thin white gravy made from a tablespoon of flour, a knob of butter or lard, and a cup of milk, salted heavily and finished with a generous crack of black pepper. That was the whole meal. The gravy soaked into the soft potato, turning it creamy, almost like mashed, but without the work. A pint of milk cost about 8 cents in 1936. A potato was 2 cents. For 11 cents, a mother could put a hot, hearty dinner on the table that filled her children's stomachs and warmed them from the inside. They called it pepper gravy in Tennessee, and white gravy in Georgia, and sawmill gravy in Alabama. Everywhere, it meant the same thing. We are still eating tonight. Number 21, potato pancakes. The Polish and German immigrant communities of Chicago and Milwaukee made this their everyday supper through the Depression, and the rest of the country learned from them. Grate one raw potato on the rough side of a box grater. Squeeze the liquid out with a dish towel, hard, almost angrily, because that water is what makes them soggy. Mix the dry pulp with a single egg, a spoonful of flour, salt, and a grated onion. Drop tablespoons into hot lard and flatten them with the back of a spoon. They cooked in 3 minutes aside, blistering brown and crisp at the edges while staying tender in the middle. One potato made 4 good-sized pancakes, enough for a hungry child. Served with a spoonful of applesauce on top, this was Wednesday dinner. The smell of onion and frying starch filled tenement hallways in Milwaukee from October through March, and every family on the floor was making the same thing on the same night because everyone got paid Friday. Number 20, mashed potato sandwich. Here is where the genius really shows itself. When Sunday dinner left a bowl of leftover mashed potatoes, a smart woman did not put them in the icebox to be reheated. She turned them into Monday's lunch. 2 slices of white bread, a thick layer of cold mashed potato, salt and pepper, maybe a smear of mustard, and that was it. The starch-on-starch combination felt wrong on paper and tasted right in practice. The cold, creamy potato against the soft bread created a texture that children genuinely loved, and the calories carried them through an entire afternoon at school. In coal country, miners packed these in their lunch pails alongside a hard-boiled egg and called it a meal. The whole thing cost about 3 cents. Today, food writers occasionally rediscover the potato sandwich and write trend pieces about how strange and wonderful it is. Your great-grandmother would have laughed at them. She knew it was just dinner. Number 19, cottage potatoes. Not to be confused with cottage fries. These were thick slabs of potato, cut about a half-inch thick, layered into a cast-iron skillet with sliced onion, a sprinkle of flour, and just enough milk to come halfway up the side. Covered tight with a lid and cooked low and slow on the back of the wood stove for 45 minutes. What came out was something between a gratin and a stew. The potatoes soft and yielding, the onions melted into the milk, the whole thing thickened by the flour into a creamy, savory dish that needed nothing else. A single skillet fed a family of 6, and the entire meal cost about 10 cents in 1935. Farm wives in Iowa and Nebraska made this when the icebox was empty and the henhouse was still molting, and the only thing reliable was the potato bin in the cellar. They called it cottage potatoes because it was the food of small homes and smaller incomes. First, pattern. Break. Here is the thing nobody talks about when they romanticize the Depression. The potato saved this country. Between 1930 and 1939, American per capita potato consumption rose by nearly 30%, not because anybody suddenly loved them more, but because the potato was the only food in the grocery store that delivered real calories for real pennies. The federal government's own Bureau of Home Economics published pamphlets in 1933 teaching housewives how to extend potatoes into multiple meals, recognizing that without this single tuber, urban food riots would have spread far beyond the few cities where they did break out. The potato is roughly 20% starch by weight. A medium potato delivers about 160 calories, 4 grams of protein, and nearly half the daily requirement of vitamin C. That last fact mattered. The reason Depression-era children did not develop scurvy in massive numbers, despite eating almost no fresh fruit, was the potato. It was not just food, it was public health policy disguised as supper. Number 18, potato and onion hash. 2 ingredients, 1 skillet, 20 minutes. A single potato diced into small cubes, 1 onion chopped rough, both tossed into a hot skillet with whatever fat was available. Bacon grease from the can on the stove was the gold standard, but lard worked, and so did the rendered fat skimmed off last Sunday's chicken broth. The potatoes browned at the edges, the onions caramelized and turned translucent. The whole skillet filled with a smell that brought neighbors to their windows. A pinch of salt, a crack of pepper, and supper was done. And for breakfast, the leftovers got topped with a fried egg if eggs were running. For dinner, it sat next to a slice of cornbread and a glass of buttermilk. The dish cost about 6 cents to make and fed 3 people. Nothing fancy ever happened in this skillet, and that was the whole point. Number 17, scalloped potatoes. Strip away the cheese, the cream, and the breadcrumbs that modern recipes pile onto this dish, and you find what it actually was during the Depression. Thin sliced raw potatoes layered in a baking dish with a few thin slices of onion, salt, pepper, a sprinkle of flour between each layer, and just enough milk to barely cover everything. Baked, covered in a slow oven for an hour, then uncovered for another 15 minutes to brown the top. That was it. The flour and milk and potato starch combined as they baked to create their own thick, creamy sauce. The top layer turned golden and crackly. The whole dish came out at 5:30, smelling like a farmhouse on washing day. A casserole this size cost about 12 cents in 1936 and fed 8 people. It was funeral food, sick neighbor food, and Wednesday night food. It still is in parts of the rural Midwest, where grandmothers learned it from their grandmothers and never updated the recipe. Number 16, potato bread. When wheat flour got too expensive and the bread ration ran out before the week did, women turned to the potato to stretch it. 1 cup of mashed potato got worked into 2 cups of flour with yeast, salt, water, and a tablespoon of sugar. The dough kneaded up smoother and softer than plain bread dough, and it rose higher, faster, and held its moisture for nearly a week instead of going stale in 2 days. The reason was simple chemistry. Potato starch absorbs and holds water, keeping the loaf tender long after regular bread would have turned to brick. The result was a slightly sweet, dense, golden bread with a crackling crust and an interior so soft you could press your thumb into it and watch it spring back. 1 potato added to the dough essentially doubled how long the loaf lasted. In a household where every slice mattered, that meant the difference between throwing food away and never having to. Number 15, real potato soup. Not the cream-laden version restaurants serve today. The Depression version. 3 potatoes, 1 onion, a quart of water, a tablespoon of bacon grease, salt, pepper, and a single bay leaf, if you had one. Simmer until the potatoes start to break apart on their own, then take a fork and crush about 1/3 of them against the side of the pot to thicken the broth. That was the technique. The crushed potatoes turned the water into a creamy, starchy soup without a single drop of milk or cream. A splash of evaporated milk at the end made it luxurious, but it was not required. This pot cost about 9 cents to make, fed 6 people, and reheated beautifully the next day. The aroma of onion and bay and simmering potato filled kitchens from Maine to Oregon throughout the 1930s. It was the soup that said, even when there is nothing, there is still soup. And while there is soup, we are still a family eating together at a table. Number 14, potato dumplings. Grandmothers from Czechoslovakia, Germany, and Poland brought this technique with them to the mill towns of the American Northeast, and during the Depression, it spread far beyond its immigrant roots. Boil 2 potatoes until soft, mash them smooth, mix with a single egg, a half cup of flour, and a pinch of salt until you have a soft dough. Roll the dough into balls about the size of a walnut and drop them into salted boiling water for 10 minutes until they floated. Those dumplings, pale and tender and just slightly chewy, became the canvas for whatever else was on the table. A spoonful of beef gravy made from a leftover bone made them feel like Sunday dinner. A drizzle of brown butter and a pinch of caraway made them taste like the old country. They cost almost nothing, and they ate like a feast. Second pattern break. Here is something the food industry would rather you forget. Between 1934 and 1939, American food advertising shifted dramatically away from staple ingredients and toward branded, packaged convenience foods. The reason was straightforward. There is no profit margin in a sack of potatoes. There is enormous profit in a box of instant mashed potato flakes that costs the manufacturer 2 cents to produce and sells for 25. Heinz, Kraft, Campbell's, and dozens of other companies spent the late 1930s and the entire 1940s teaching American housewives that real cooking was hard, time-consuming, and beneath them. The same skills your great-grandmother used to stretch one potato into a week of dinners were systematically reframed as drudgery. By 1955, instant potato flakes were a billion-dollar industry, and the actual knowledge of how to cook a real potato had begun to slip out of American kitchens. We did not lose this knowledge by accident. We were sold a story until we forgot we ever knew it. Number 13, mock fish. This is the dish that pulled off the most impressive trick on this entire list. Catholic families across the country needed something fish-like for Friday dinner, and during the Depression, fish was a luxury most could not afford. The solution was potato. 2 potatoes were boiled and mashed, then mixed with 1 egg, a half cup of cracker crumbs, salt, pepper, and a generous spoonful of butter. Shape the mixture into patties the size and shape of a fish fillet. Dredge them in flour, then in beaten egg, then in more cracker crumbs. Fry the fillets in hot lard until they are golden brown and crispy on both sides. The outside crackled like a perfectly fried fish. The inside was creamy and tender. When topped with a squeeze of lemon and a spoonful of homemade tartar sauce, the whole thing fooled children completely. Mothers who had used this trick for years would smile when their kids asked what kind of fish they were eating. It was not lying exactly, it was magic. Number 12, potato kugel. Jewish immigrant grandmothers in New York, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh built this dish for the Sabbath and ate it the rest of the week because it was the cheapest possible Friday dinner. Grate 4 potatoes and 1 onion into a bowl. Add 2 eggs, a quarter cup of flour or matzo meal, salt, and pepper. Pour the mixture into a greased baking dish and bake at high heat for 1 hour until the top turned dark mahogany brown and the edges crisped against the sides of the pan. What came out was a savory potato cake, dense and rich at the bottom, crispy and golden on top, that fed an entire family for the cost of about 15 cents. Slice it like a casserole and serve it with a spoonful of sour cream or applesauce, or just plain. Leftovers got fried in the morning skillet for breakfast. Nothing was wasted, nothing was forgotten, and every single slice carried the weight of 3,000 years of cooks who had figured out how to make bread without flour, meals without meat, and Sabbath dinner without money. Number 11, German potato salad. Forget the mayonnaise. The real Depression era German potato salad was a hot dish made with vinegar, bacon grease, and onion. Boil 3 potatoes until just tender, slice them while still warm. In a skillet, fry 2 slices of bacon until crispy. Remove the bacon and crumble it. Into the bacon fat, add a chopped onion and cook until soft. Pour in 1/4 cup of cider vinegar, a tablespoon of sugar, salt, and pepper. The whole pan would hiss and steam. Pour the hot dressing over the warm potatoes, toss with the crumbled bacon, and serve immediately. The vinegar cut through the starch. The bacon fat coated each slice in salt and smoke. The whole dish came together in 20 minutes and cost about 11 cents to make. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania farm families ate this hot in winter and cold in summer, and the recipe never changed because nobody could ever improve on it. Number 10, Depression potato chowder. Without the clams, without the salt pork, without the heavy cream. The Depression version was elegant in its restraint. 1 potato diced small, 1 onion diced small, a single carrot if you had one, a quart of water, a tablespoon of butter, and at the very end, half a cup of milk stirred in to make it creamy. Simmered for 30 minutes, salted heavily, pepper at the table. That was the whole thing. The starch from the potato thickened the broth. The milk turned it pale and creamy. The butter floated in golden coins across the top. This was a dish that whispered abundance without ever actually achieving it. Served in a wide soup bowl with 2 saltine crackers crumbled on top. It felt like a proper meal in a way that was hard to explain to anyone who had not eaten it. A family in Maine could make it. A family in California could make it. Geography did not matter. Hunger did. Number 9, loaded baked potato. 1 large baking potato, scrubbed clean, pierced with a fork, and baked in a slow oven for 1 hour until the skin turned crackling crisp and the inside steamed soft. Split open while still hot. Topped with whatever scraps the kitchen could muster. A spoonful of leftover beans. A pat of butter. A drizzle of bacon grease. A sprinkle of grated cheese if it was the end of the week and someone had splurged. A handful of crumbled bacon ends from the butcher's discard bin. The potato itself was the meal. Everything else was decoration. A single potato delivered enough calories to anchor a working man's dinner. It cost 2 cents. And the resourcefulness of what you put on top revealed everything about how that household was managing. Mothers competed quietly at church suppers, each loaded baked potato a small testament to their ability to make something from almost nothing. Number 8, potato candy. The last sweet thing in some children's lives during the worst years of the Depression. 1 small boiled potato, mashed completely smooth and cooled, then mixed with confectioner's sugar, a cup at a time until it formed a soft white dough. Rolled out thin on a sugar-dusted counter, spread with a thin layer of peanut butter, then rolled up like a jelly roll and sliced into pinwheels. The starch from the potato bound the sugar into something that tasted like cream candy but cost a fraction of the price. A single potato could make 40 pinwheels. The whole batch cost about 15 cents and provided weeks of after-school treats stretched carefully across the slow afternoons of January and February. Coal mining families in Kentucky and West Virginia made this on Sunday afternoons and rationed it through the week. Children who grew up eating potato candy carried the memory of it into adulthood the way other children remembered birthday cake. Number 7. Mock chicken croquettes. Another magnificent piece of culinary deception. 2 boiled potatoes, mashed smooth, mixed with a finely chopped onion, a single egg, 1/2 cup of cracker crumbs, a teaspoon of poultry seasoning, salt, and pepper. The poultry seasoning was the trick. That blend of sage, thyme, and marjoram tricked the nose into expecting chicken before the mouth had a chance to figure out it was eating potato. Shape the mixture into small logs, roll them in cracker crumbs, and deep fry in lard until golden brown. Served with brown gravy made from a bouillon cube, they tasted shockingly close to real chicken croquettes. A package of poultry seasoning cost 5 cents in 1935 and lasted 6 months. The whole meal came in under 15 cents and fed 6 people. Mothers who served this on a Sunday afternoon were not pretending. They were performing a small act of magic for children who deserved to feel that they had eaten something special. Number 6. Potato cake. Third pattern break. Here is something modern cooks forget about the potato. It is one of the only ingredients on earth that can absorb fat, salt, acid, and flavor without losing its structure. That is not poetry. That is chemistry. The starch granules in a potato swell during cooking and become microscopic sponges that hold on to whatever liquid you cook them in. That is why a potato simmered in chicken broth tastes like chicken. That is why a potato fried in bacon grease tastes like bacon. That is why a potato in a stew with 2 pieces of meat in it can carry the flavor of the entire meal across every bite on every plate at the table. Depression-era cooks did not know the science. They did not need to. They knew that 1 piece of bacon dropped into a pot of potatoes meant 6 people would taste bacon at supper. They knew that a single ham bone simmered with potatoes meant the family would taste ham for 2 days. The potato was a flavor multiplier, and it kept the country fed when nothing else could. Potato cake. Yes, cake. As in birthday cake, as in dessert. Grandmothers in the Depression worked 1 cup of mashed potato into a chocolate cake recipe and changed everything. The potato added moisture that kept the cake tender for nearly a week without going dry. It added a faint sweetness that let bakers use less sugar. And critically, it stretched the flour budget by replacing nearly a cup of expensive wheat flour with cheap potato. The cake came out dense, rich, intensely chocolatey, and almost fudgy in texture. Frosted with a simple boiled icing made from sugar and water, it was the centerpiece of birthdays in households where birthdays usually went unmarked. The recipe lived in handwritten notebooks, passed down from mother to daughter. It almost never appeared in printed cookbooks. It was a family secret that thousands of families happened to share without ever knowing it. Number 5. Potato and dumpling soup. This was the meal that doubled the potato. Start a pot of potato soup using the basic recipe. 2 potatoes, 1 onion, water, and fat. While the soup simmered, make a simple drop dumpling dough with a cup of flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, a pinch of salt, and just enough milk to make a thick batter. Drop the batter by tablespoons directly into the simmering soup. Cover the pot tightly and do not lift the lid for 15 minutes. The dumplings steamed inside the broth, swelling into pale, tender clouds that absorbed the potato flavor from the inside out. By the time the lid came off, the soup had thickened, the dumplings had cooked through, and the whole pot was rich enough to satisfy a grown man who had been working construction since dawn. Total cost in 1934 dollars, about 13 cents. Total servings, 8. Some women added a single carrot for color. Some did not bother. The dish needed nothing. Number 4, potato gravy on bread. No meat involved, no drippings, just genius. 2 potatoes boiled until soft, then mashed into the water they cooked in to create a thick, starchy slurry. Stirred over the heat with a tablespoon of butter and a generous pour of milk until it turned into a creamy white gravy with the body of cream and the flavor of pure comfort. Salted heavily. Cracked black pepper on top. Ladled over 2 slices of toasted white bread that turned soft and almost custard-like as the gravy soaked in. This was the Sunday breakfast of farm families in Missouri and Arkansas through the entire Depression. It cost about 7 cents to make. It fed 4 people, and it carried the entire household through Sunday morning church and most of the afternoon. The whole house smelled like butter and pepper by 7:30. Children who grew up eating this could close their eyes 40 years later and still smell it. That is what real food does. It does not just feed you, it records itself. Number 3, potato hash with bacon ends. Here is the dish a coal miner's wife in West Virginia invented in 1933 and taught to her sister, who taught it to her neighbor, who taught it to her cousin in Pittsburgh, until the recipe traveled through Appalachia like gossip. Walk into the butcher shop at the end of the day and ask for the bacon ends, the irregular scraps and trimmings that did not fit into the sliced packages. The butcher charged a nickel for a pound. At home, render those ends in a hot skillet until they crisped golden and the fat pooled deep. Add 2 potatoes, diced small, and 1 onion, chopped rough. Cook everything together over medium heat for 20 minutes, stirring just enough to keep things from burning, but not so much that the potatoes never caramelized. By the time the dish was done, every cube of potato had a crackling brown crust. Every bit of onion was sweet and translucent, and the bacon ends had infused the whole skillet with smoke and salt. A single pound of bacon ends and 2 potatoes made a meal for 6. The whole dish came in around 12 cents. Nothing on the menu of any modern American restaurant beats this for value. Nothing. Number 2, boiled potato with everything. This is the dish that defined poverty cooking in the rural North, and it was the simplest item on this entire list. 1 potato per person, boiled in heavily salted water until tender, drained and split open on the plate. The toppings were the meal. Whatever the household had became the topping. A spoonful of cottage cheese, a pat of butter, a sprinkle of dill from the windowsill, a drizzle of bacon grease, a scraping of garlic, a handful of green onions, a spoonful of stewed tomatoes, a pour of leftover gravy. The genius was in the multiplication. A family of 6 could eat the same boiled potato dinner with 6 different toppings, and every person at the table felt like they had been given a custom meal. Mother got her butter, father got his bacon, the children got their cheese. The boiled potato itself cost 2 cents. The toppings came from whatever was already in the kitchen. The whole production cost less than a dime and felt like generosity. Number 1, the potato and bean pot. The meal that fed more American families through the Depression than any other dish on earth. 2 potatoes, diced rough. A cup of dried beans, soaked overnight. 1 onion. A piece of salt pork. A quart of water. Simmered for 4 hours until the beans broke down and the potatoes melted at the edges, and the whole pot turned thick and creamy beyond what the ingredients had any right to produce. The smell filled the house by mid-afternoon. Children came home from school and smelled supper waiting. A family of 8 ate from this pot for 2 days. Total cost in 1934, under 15 cents. It was nutrition, comfort, ritual, and survival in one battered enamel pot. The meal that proved you could be poor and still set a table. We threw it away the moment we could afford to, and most Americans under 50 have never tasted it. That is the loss that matters. Here is my challenge. Pick one. Make the potato and bean pot. Make the loaded baked potato with whatever is in your fridge. Make the potato candy with your kids on Sunday afternoon. Then come back and tell me if your great-grandmother knew something we have all been talked out of remembering. Drop the one you are going to try in the comments. I want to know if the mock fish gets more love than the potato gravy on toast. Because these were not just cheap meals, they were proof that a single potato in the right hands could keep a family fed, a kitchen warm, and a generation alive.